enjoy these. But we have to be polite. All right, so everything off? Okay, and so I just shot down a few things, and I'll tell you which things I'm thinking about doing. But the big thing is, you know, for me, I just like hearing what you learn. I really enjoy hearing. You got the same things, and we're making orders to you too.
Okay. So I interviewed my grandma on my mom's side, and this is mostly focused on my grandpa. He passed away in 2004, so this is from what she knows. My grandparents got married in June of 1960. They were 18 and 23 years old, and at that time, my grandpa was a mortician and funeral director. And there was not much going on with the war at that moment. However, in September of 1960, my grandpa was given a letter notice that he was going to be drafted. And at that point, they were already married at the time, so he was able to get out on a deferment, but he decided that he would stay back just to take care of my grandma. And at that time, there was still little public discussion, so they didn't know what was going on. They moved to a smaller city in Montana. And I think it was somewhat close to Great Falls, so it was close to where the military missiles are now. And then closer to 1961, during Christmas, they heard about the events like the Bay of Pigs, and they were swayed. They weren't in support of the war, more so my grandma than my grandpa. And they didn't know too many details besides what was being shared on the news, so not very much. And then as months and years passed by, they still knew little. They weren't sharing anything, so from what my parents were able to figure out, not much. And then when they had moved to Helena in 1967, more family members were being drafted to war. If I remember correctly, I think it was my grandpa's brother who ended up being drafted. He decided to defer, and he went to Berlin. And then they didn't take place any riots or protests, anything of the sort. They tried to stay as neutral as possible because where they were in Helena at the time, the job that my grandma had was very politically divisive, so she did not want to be open about what she believed, just to steer clear from any, can't think of the word, that's okay. And then he passed away in 2004 afterwards, I just mentioned that already, but throughout all of that, he was very stressed out because they had my grandma right, I think at the peak, or not my grandma, my aunt, right at the peak of the war. And so they had to worry about that with another letter as well.
Did they know anybody else who was drafted or when?
Not that I was able to get out of her, but I do know of my grandpa and then his brother.
And he was drafted, but
he decided to get out of it by going to Berlin.
He just went to Berlin?
Well, like, I can't remember what it was called, but when they tried to get out of going to Vietnam, he went to Berlin instead.
I'm not sure. The deferment, I guess, would that be? I'm just trying to figure out how he got to Berlin. So he never entered the army?
No.
Oh, so he just fled. Okay, I get it, yeah. I don't blame him, I understand completely. So they're just kind of out of it. I mean, they just knew what was going on, but did you ask her any of the other questions that were on the video?
No, that's what I was able to get out of her. She's very busy. She's 84 now, and she still works 2 jobs.
Oh, here?
Yes, she does real estate and then something for the state.
Wow. So she basically told her narrative.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, good job. Well done. Good. All right, who did I say was going next? Okay, Larry, you're up. Did I say Larry?
Yep.
Everyone's just agreeing.
All right, that's what you said.
That's what you said. That's what I said. That's what you said. All right. Give me 1 sec. Let me set up. I just forgot.
The questions are up here. I don't even need to bring them up.
Okay, go.
All right, so the person I decided to interview was my grandpa Carl. He's an Anaconda native. He's lived there all his life since he was born in 1953. And during the Vietnam War, he was in high school during pretty much most of it. He graduated in 1971. So he was a teen for most of it. So he didn't serve. And at the time, what he thought about the America's involvement in Vietnam was that he didn't really know anything about it until 1969, like ish, 1969, when he started thinking about it, because he was getting near the age where he might get drafted. He thought about it a bit before, because both of his brothers were in the military during the time. In 1965, his brother Chuck received a draft notice, so he decided to join the Navy, and he served on a destroyer that operated around Vietnam, shelling other ships. And in 1967, his brother Dwayne, I don't think this is right. I think he might have gotten some of his facts mixed up now I'm looking at it. In 1967, it says his brother Dwayne got drafted. He joined the Army. And then, I can't remember what other brother it was. I think it was Terry. He was already in the National Guard, so we didn't really have to worry about it. And then he started thinking a little bit more about the draft in 1969, where he was a junior in high school when he got his lottery number, which was 146. And he said at that time they went up to about 215. So he was, he said, very happy when Nixon ended the draft on, I think my grandpa said 1973, July 1st. And then, yeah, he didn't serve in the military, so I couldn't really ask him that question. But as the war kind of unfolded, he kind of saw the U.S. in a different light. He noticed it was a very tumultuous period, and he said lots of stuff was happening. One specific event that stuck with him was Kent State. There was protests there. I think he said May 4th, 1970. There was student protests, and he didn't really think it was a protest because he thought, they were just kind of saying the truth, and he kind of thought it was crazy that they closed a bunch of colleges, even all the way across the United States. And let's see. And then he talked a lot. Actually, that'll be a different question, I guess. And then during the war years, he didn't think that McNamara and Johnson had chosen the right things to do, because he was seeing a lot of death on the TV, and he knew guys who had been in Vietnam, and they told him that it wasn't just to preserve democracy. He told me specifically about his friend John. He didn't tell me his last name. That used to pick up bodies and put them in body bags after battles, and he said that once he got back, he was never really normal. He just kind of described him as bizarre. So and he also knew other people, but they didn't really want to talk about it at all. All right. One thing he was happy though about U.S. policy was that we got out of the war. He thought that was a good decision, made a little too late, and he was disgusted with the way that it was done. He didn't like Agent Orange and stuff like that. And then, so yeah, he believed that we did not take care of the war very well. And then he said he was in reaction to the Quaker that killed himself on the Pentagon grounds. He said that he was aware of several people that had done similar things on the news, in the evening news, and he said that it was kind of a wake-up call. And he respected their conviction, but he didn't think that it was necessary. He kind of think they went a little too far by killing themselves. Other memories of the period, he talked a lot about the drugs that were around at the time. He said that even in Montana, in Anaconda, you could find marijuana and acid very easily. And he was offered it many times. He told me he did not partake though. And other lessons he thought we could learn was never to get in a similar situation. He compared it to Afghanistan, and he said that we made a mistake by being in Afghanistan. And then I kind of added a couple things. I showed him the photo of like the general shooting the guy in the street.
Oh, in Saigon, yeah.
Yeah, in Saigon, and he recognized it immediately, and he brought up on his own the most like striking photo for him was the little girl running towards the camera after they dropped napalm on them, and then I asked him also what he thought about the MLK assassination, and he said it was horrifying and it reminded him of Kennedy, and everyone in the country was in shock whether or not they liked him. All right, and that's all I had.
He was born in 53?
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, he was 15. I mean, he was old enough. You're old enough to know.
Yeah.
Let me ask one quick question. Did he know why you were fighting in Vietnam? Was he ever told? Did you ever?
No.
I was wondering what people knew.
Well, I mean, he said later that he was told that it was to preserve democracy, but I mean that's just pretty blanket. Also, I forgot to mention, he was very happy that Nixon ended the draft because he was gonna plan on draft day if his number got called. It was like a 60-40 whether or not he would go to Canada. 60 he goes to Canada, 40 he stays.
So going for it.
Yeah.
Did Dwayne? Didn't your brother Dwayne? Did he go to Vietnam?
Dwayne.
Was any of the one who was dropped in the army?
Yeah, I think he was in Germany though.
Oh, went to Germany. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, good job, Larry. Well done. Two good ones. Good start. Who's next? Who? We're going quick. And you've been. Just a sec. Oh, I got it. Yours did? I think it was. Give me 1 sec. I got it. And we got a couple days. So if we don't get everybody, don't worry. Everybody will go. Okay, Luke.
All right, so I decided to interview my grandma on my mom's side. She was born in 1955 in Butte. Her grandparents were immigrants from Finland and Ireland, so she's like 50-50. Yeah, so her whole family's from Butte, and what a wonderful place. She, when she was 9, her uncle, his name was Dan. He was drafted when he was 20, and he went, and she, at the time, since she was just in elementary school, she didn't understand why. And when I asked her, she said her parents didn't even know either. They just thought, well, we had to be there. That's all they said. And when he did get drafted, she said she started crying and told her parents that he was never coming back. And 2 years later, so he came back to visit and then went back. And then after 2 years, he was killed. His job, he was the guy with the radio. So yeah. She said that her and her family were at a Butte High football scrimmage on like a Saturday. I don't know why they'd be watching a scrimmage, but they were. And then when they went home, they had people there to talk to them. And then since it took a while for the body to get shipped back, they had someone from the military visit them every day until the funeral, which I thought was interesting. She didn't have too much to say about the draft since she wasn't part of it, but she knew that her parents were very upset. Her dad wasn't drafted because he blew his knee out playing baseball, so he couldn't go. And she said her high school class was like one of the last ones to be like eligible to be drafted, and she had friends in there that were really nervous, and they knew their draft numbers, and one of them, she taught with him forever, and she'd tell her students, go ask him about his draft number, he'll still remember it. So yeah, and then since she didn't really have any views before the war other than she had to be there, she learned more after she got older and started to teach and stuff, and she said it was just very disappointing to hear about it all and how her uncle died for a war we probably shouldn't have been in. And that was kind of the lesson that if she had any lessons. She said we shouldn't get in any war like that again. However, it seemed that we did with Afghanistan and Iraq. And she had a couple other memories of the war. After it was over, everyone in Butte, I don't know if this was anywhere else, but she said everyone in Butte was very mad. They were very mad because a lot of members of Butte actually died in the war, like more than anywhere else in Montana, it seemed. They were very mad that we lost and all the people died. And she also could remember the music about the war. That's what she remembers the best, was the music. She can remember some of those songs, and they're still her favorites. And she also, when she was younger, when people would come back, she would see all over people without limbs and people with wounds, and it was really sad to see for her. And a lot of, well, not a lot, but a few veterans were ignored, it seemed, in the community. They didn't really reach out to them. And that was about it. She just couldn't remember too much about when she was a kid about why, but it was very sad for her and her family because of her uncle. And he was 22 when he died.
And she probably knew other people without support system.
Yeah.
What did she teach?
She taught 5th grade at Jefferson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And her uncle's name was Daniel Jenkins. I still need to find a picture of him.
Yeah. Do that too. Did you ask her any other questions about like when McNamara said evil must be?
Oh yeah, I asked her about that, and she just said I don't know. So
That's a good answer. Yeah. And yeah, so did you learn anything you didn't know?
Not really. Most of it I kind of predicted because I've been told by my mom about like the stories, so I kind of knew everything, except just more about like Butte. I didn't know that they were so angry about everything.
I knew they had a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you go to a couple of places and there's still pictures of that.
She also said that her uncle was the first one from Montana to die, but I looked that up later to see if she was right. No, but I can see how he'd be one of the first ones, like one of them. But the first one actually also, I think, was from Butte. So.
It's the first year found, but that's.
Yeah.
All right, good job.
Printing, or should I just pull up the document?
I'm printing what I have.
Okay, cool.
Give me a sec. All right. Good one so far. When's the bell ring? I never know.
106.
106. Okay, we're doing good.
So I don't know if any of you went to Broadwater Elementary School, but the librarian there, Miss Unruh, I interviewed her. She was born around 1937, 1938, so she's like 86. I think she turns 87 this year. So she was old enough when the war started. She didn't have any brothers though. She had all sisters, and her husband was too old to be drafted, so she didn't really pay much attention to the draft. And then she had like just a household of like little kids, so she wasn't paying too much attention to the war. However, like her family, she was raised heavily like Democratic at first. However, she believed the domino theory pretty strongly, so she leaned more into the Republican side when the war first started. She even campaigned for Goldwater. However, after actually the Daisy ad that Partridge shows, like with the counting of the little girl, that actually swayed her opinion completely, which I think is a little something. She started supporting LBJ after that. But yeah, she didn't pay too much attention to the war, but after like her views have changed time and time again after the war, especially after reading a biography actually about LBJ, she just started thinking about him completely different ways. She now believes we let Vietnam down heavily, especially after pulling out. She even brought up how like the president was asking, it was like at the UN or something, was asking for help with Vietnam, and then years later the war started. She talked about that, and she now heavily thinks that Lyndon and McNamara lied heavily throughout the war, and from this ever since the war, she doesn't think we're even doing any better as a country. She thinks we repeated the same mistake when we pulled out back in like 2020, 2021. Thinks we made the same mistake there. And she believes the last time we were right about any sort of conflict was during World War II. And that as people, it's kind of our duty to do our own research and to never just blindly follow politicians like we did in Vietnam and how we just believed McNamara and everything we were being told and that we were winning. She also heavily believed like when we were going over the myths about Vietnam, like the one about how soldiers were being treated when they came home, she thought it was just absolutely awful, except she never saw anything happening. But she was like, oh, those soldiers were treated horribly. I was like, oh, did you ever see any instances of anything happening? No, but I heard about it from this person. I heard about it from this person. I was like, okay. But yeah, she just thinks like a big thing to take from that is just never trust a politician.
Did you ask her any other questions like human beings must stop killing each other or McNamara saying?
Yeah, she did. She agreed heavily with that. Like as much as she didn't like McNamara, she did like that about how like if we're gonna keep going as a country, it's just like a world. Humans just need to like stop killing each other, and we just gotta stop being evil. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep repeating the same things over and over and over as we did back in the early 2000s through till like 2020, 2021.
And did she know anybody who was drafted or?
She had no brothers. Her husband was a doctor and was too old to be drafted, and all of her kids were like super young. Yeah, she wasn't paying too much attention to much. She just blindly followed everything. And then after the war happened, and then she became an educator, and she wanted to learn more about the history, and she became a librarian. She started doing all this other reading and started educating herself, and was like, yikes, we need to be a lot more educated.
Valid point. Yeah, I see. You
Yeah.
trust people. Yeah.
Yeah, she's 86 and still works at that library.
That's pretty amazing. All right, good job. All right, time for one more. Who would like to go? Okay. Give me 1 sec. Got it. All right.
Okay, so I interviewed my maternal grandfather. He is a Scottish immigrant and he moved here when he was 1. He moved to Southern California and he has a big family. He has 6 siblings, 3 brothers, and 2 sisters, and including himself. And fun fact, his draft number was 312. He wasn't really in support of the cause of the Vietnam War, but he was in support of the men that were going there and the people. He was in support of the. Okay, sorry guys. He was in support of the military mostly, but he wasn't in support of like the cause of the war and the reasoning as to why we were going there. He thought the reasoning behind the war at the time, because he was relatively young, he was in middle school, early high school. He thought we were there to combat communism and help the people of South Vietnam. And he, in relation to the draft, he wasn't very pro-draft, but he wasn't necessarily against the draft. He was willing to go. Both him and his brother were willing to go if they were drafted. His mom was not so pro-draft. She really was hoping that if they were drafted, she was making plans to send them to Canada, but they were against that and they were willing to fight if they were drafted, which fortunately for all of the brothers, none of them were drafted, and their dad was too old. He knew some of his friends and classmates, older siblings that were drafted and killed in the war, but other than that, he didn't have really anybody who was close to him that was drafted in the war. He couldn't, in relation to like the policy changes as the war unfolded, he didn't really understand why the war was still progressing and we were having such little success when we were still there and we were still sending troops, but we were having such little success and we were still fighting basically a war that he thought we wouldn't really win. And he thought that the government wasn't as transparent as they could have been with the people, and the news articles and the stories that were coming out were kind of confusing and contradicting. regarding the escalation of the war efforts, he thought there was like all propaganda and the news stories were like. He was kind of confused because like what the government was telling me versus what the news stories and the articles and the pictures were showing were very conflicting, so it was kind of confusing to him. And then he believed in the first thing that about the Buddhists. Oh, did I get that wrong? The people that were killing themselves at like the Pentagon and stuff like that. And then when McNamara was talking about how like we need to stop killing other human beings, he said he agreed with that, but he also said that sometimes we need to make certain sacrifices to like protect our country and our people. And in that instance, in the Vietnam War instance, that wasn't really a thing. Wasn't really what he felt like it was for. And then he said that he also agrees with how much evil must we do, but he also says that sometimes it's necessary to take steps to minimize damage, but while also doing things to protect our country and our people. And then memories he has that he remembered was that many of his friends and one of his girlfriends and his siblings were drafted, and the military was very poorly treated when they came back. Never provided any specific evidence on the poor military treatment, but he was very adamant about how poorly the military was treated, and that we should have treated them better once they came back. And then he was also talking about how like the wars in Iran and Iraq, how when they come back they're like heroes, and with the Vietnam War they were just not treated very well, disrespected. And lessons that we learned from this experience was that we should be very wary about like escalation of war efforts and listening to the government, and to make sure to do our own like research behind things before going full support or fully against something. And then also he feels that we have come a long way in the treatment of our soldiers.
Sounds good. How old was he again?
He was, I think right now he's 72. So I think he was early high school
Yeah. So
when it started.
old enough to, I mean, he knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Going to mid-50s. Yeah, that makes sense. And all three of his brothers, he had three, were they older or young?
He had one older brother and one younger brother.
I mean, all,
All made it out.
and so friends and girlfriend's brother, is that what you said he got drafted too? Yeah, and so he lived right in the middle. Where do you grow up?
Southern California. I'm not sure where specifically, but Southern California is where he said.
Good job. All right. Timed it out perfectly. Who wants to be first tomorrow? Okay, Chris first. Who will be second? All right. By the way, they did treat the soldiers horribly. They just ignored them. To be honest, I think they're doing that now. Oh, God, thank you. Very good. So we're going to do a lot tomorrow. These went really well. I really enjoy these. Who else sent theirs?